morning, everyone. This is Mohammed Sadaqat. I'm working as an assistant planning manager in Qatar, in a multinational company named Mace International Limited. I would first like to thank Anand Institute of Technology and the staff there for organizing this. It's a very useful seminar, especially for budding civil engineers like you guys. I hope this session will be helpful to you. This is an introduction to what is planning and what is project management, how it is helpful in construction industry. It will give you an overview. The final year students and third year students may relate to few of the management concepts here, whereas the first year and second year students, it will be new for you. I hope this acts as a learning session, and I'm there to clarify any doubts which you come across in this. Let's get into the presentation. First of all, what is management? Management, in layman's term, can simply defined as getting work done. That is management, getting work done. It may be through people or through resources, but how we utilize the resource is what defines a successful management. So what is a successful project management? Getting work done with optimum defines a successful available resources. So what is a successful project management? Getting work done with optimum defines a successful available resources. So what is a successful project management? Getting work done with optimum defines a successful available resources. So what is a successful project management? Getting work done with optimum defines a successful available resources. The cost and budget of the project exceeds the plan. Okay, so let us get into detail with an example. For the basic management process, this is applicable for all projects: planning, organizing, directing, and controlling. So first, before we start a project, we would first plan, like what exactly is a project, how we are going to do it, what exactly we need. It's an overall high level planning. Then we organize things, like how we have to do it and with how many resources we have to do it. Then we direct it, like this is the direction you should go. We have a timeline. You should get completed in 6 months or 8 months. We direct it and we control it. Controlling in the sense we control the quality, we control the cost. We control both the things. We control the resources so that we don't end up overspending the resources to get works done. This is applicable to a small scale construction project also. For example, take your own house construction. First you develop a plan. You lay out, I want two bedroom flat or 3 bedroom home. So then you take that and you call an engineer or a mestri, a foreman, which is called a mestri there. So you explain this to him. What he does is he alters the plan considering the government regulations, like the floor space index has to be considered. What is the set of length, set of area around the building. So he does all that corrections and he gets the approval from the government authorities to start the project. So this is called organizing. And then what he does is he recruits a team under him, and his team would be working for your project. So then he directs them. Okay, now start with the excavation. Now start with the footings. Now start with the plinths. Now start with the columns. Okay, now we will plan for slab concreting. Then once the slab is done, let's do the parapet and block walls. And once it is done, let's go with the plastering. And once the plastering is done, let's go with the painting. And once everything is done, finally we pull the cables and everything, and switchboards, final fixtures, everything, and the project is handed over. So this is called directing, and where you get to control this. You as a client, you are the owner of the house. You should make sure that the foreman, that is a masonry, doesn't overspend his resources. Like if he rags on the project, for example, if it's a 2-story building, he should be able to complete it in 3 to 4 months. If he is dragging beyond that, you would be eventually ending up paying extra money to the labor. Of course, material will be a little bit consumed, I understand, but the labor is what you are going to spend an extra amount. So that will end up that will increase your total project value. So this is what you control here. How do you control it? You control in terms of quality as well as quantity. Like he should not order extra materials. He should order only what is required. And he should, instead of ordering a bulk order, you should ask him to order part by part. Okay, first order the material for first slab, then for the second slab. Don't order it in bulk. If you order steel for the entire building now, the steel will get rusted. Then it is a quality concern. So you control these things. This is how we control. We'll get into more details on this. Now, what is project management? we saw what is management. So just applying the same principles of management in handling any particular project is called project management. It's as simple as that. In order for any project manager to be successful, she should be able to complete the project on time and within budget. Just note on the word on time and within budget. This is what matters. How you do it, that is up to you. Those are the skills you develop as you grow into your career. On time and within budget, a project should always be completed. How it can be completed? It can be completed through effective project management and leadership skills. One can complete a project successfully on time and within budget. Leadership skills are very important. So just a basic overview of how a project is awarded. Okay. I work in Gulf, but this may be applicable to people in India also. Just overview for students who don't know what is the process of how a project, how a big large scale project gets awarded. So first we have a client here. That is, client is called as employer. Employer in the sense he employs the people. He is the one who finances the project. Okay, so he has a plan in mind. He has a concept in mind. For example, he wants a building to be constructed, maybe a hospital building, or maybe a commercial mall, or maybe a big apartment. Okay, what he does is, once he has a design in mind, he employs a project management consultancy, PMC. It is called PMC. He hires a PMC. Okay. Now, PMC will act as an intermediary between the client and the contractor. Okay, client says that, no, I don't want much tension on this. You manage things. I just want the project to be completed on time and within my budget. How you manage it is up to you. I'm paying you a fee. So the client says the project management consultancy this. Okay, then what the project management consultancy does, if the design is already in place, the PMC will straight away float the tenders. Okay, if the design is not in place, the PMC will hire a design consultancy, and that design consultancy will design the project. Then they will approach the PMC for client's approval. Once it is approved, then they go for the tender stage. So here, if you can see the bidder 1, bidder 2, bidder 3. So for example, there's a project for a hospital building, okay, or for a commercial mall, for example. Okay, now I'm floating the tender. There may be many people who bid for the project, but I'm going to consider only the lowest bidders. Okay, so 3 bidders are lowest. So one is L&T, who has bid for 100 crores. Another one is Shapoorji, who is bid for 110 crores. And another one is Tata Homes, who has bid for 90 crores. Now, who is the lowest here? Of course, it is Tata Homes. Tata Homes is the lowest. So we will call him as L1. L1 means he is the lowest bidder. Okay, L2 is L&T with 100 crores. He is the second lowest bidder. L3 is Shapoorji. He is the third lowest bidder. Now, being a PMC, what I would do is I would analyze all these bidders and their proposals. And if all the 3 have agreed that they will complete the project in the same timeline, I will prefer the lowest bidder because he is giving me a good value. Like, right, 90 crores, he is going to complete my entire project according to my requirements, the client's requirements, and in the same timeline. Why should I spend extra 10 crore, 20 crore? So I'm selecting the lowest bidder, L1, as the main contractor. Now come to this is the tender award stage. Now come to the construction stage. In the construction stage, what the client does is, the client doesn't interact with the main contractor. He interacts only with the PMC. Okay. Now PMC gets control of the main contractor, that is Tata Homes. So the main contractor, what he will do is, he will have some subcontractors and suppliers. Subcontractors, he may have many subcontractors for specialized works, like for fixing the doors, he may have a separate subcontractor. He might not be specialized in that. For fixing windows or glasses, separate contractor. For false ceiling, he may have a separate contractor. It's up to him how he controls the resources. If he's not having sufficient carpenters, he would be hiring it. He would be giving a subcontractor. So we are not bothered about the subcontractors, but we are bothered about the main contractor, their quality of work, because the subcontractor and suppliers will be directly managed by Tata Homes, the main contractor. Okay, so this is our general overview of the project award process. Now, coming to project management in construction industry, how important it is. As we all know, construction is one of the most profitable businesses, which involves very high investment and for large scale projects, and it is responsible for majority of hard labor jobs. So it is very important to have a plan, a program, timeline in place, so that the project gets completed on time and within budget. Because if the client suffers losses, obviously the entire team suffers, and there will be a lot of impact. Now, most of the high value projects, are awarded with a delay penalty. What is this delay penalty? For example, in a star hotel, for example, take a star hotel. I'll give an example. Okay, for any project, if the project's value is high, they will introduce a delay penalty. Like if the duration of the project is 1 year, if they are not able to complete it on time, they'll introduce a delay penalty up to 10% of the total project value. Now, why is this? I will let you know in the next step. Now, consider this an example. A hotel project is awarded with a duration of 12 months for completion and handover. Okay, so the hotel project should be completed in 12 months. Okay, the hotel would generate a revenue of 10 lakhs from the client from day one of operation. Okay, imagine the hotel, once it is completed and it is functional, each day the hotel is going to generate 10 lakh rupees of revenue. Okay, if the project is delayed by 1 month, client will suffer a revenue loss of 3 crores. That is 10 lakhs into 30 days, 1 month, right? So 3 crores, which he may or may not absorb depending on his financial strength. Okay? So here, time plays a critical element, which has a direct impact on cost. So if the project is delayed by 1 month, the client is going to suffer a loss of 3 crores. If the project is delayed by 2 months, the client is going to suffer a loss of 6 crores. This is just an example. For large scale projects, it may be more than this, maybe more than this. Okay? Imagine why he would suffer this loss. Okay, for example, if I am the client, okay, I have 100 crores of capital or savings in my account. I finance it directly. I don't have any risk. Okay, although I will suffer the loss, it will be on paper. Like it will not be any indirect loss to me. Okay, it will be a direct loss, of course. But if I don't have sufficient funds, I am getting loan from bank. I have only 50 crores with me and I am getting loan for 50 crores from the bank. I have to pay interest for the bank for those 50 crores. And if the project is not functional after 1 year, for every 1 month of delay, I would pay extra interest to the bank. So that adds up to my loss. So that is why always the client introduces a delay penalty up to 10% of the project value. Here it is up to 10% of the project value. Maybe in India, it may be different. But in general practice, the delay penalty cannot exceed 10% of the project value. Let us see the stages in a project. These are called process groups. A project has 5 main stages. Okay? First is project initiation, project planning, project execution, project monitoring and controlling, project closeout. Okay? These 5, you can relate these 5 important stages with any project. Okay? Each stage has a set of processes. There are a total of 49 processes. These are according to PMBOK, that is project management body of knowledge. These are distributed between 10 knowledge areas. What are those knowledge areas? We will see it later. So what is project initiation? First, project initiation is done by the client. Okay, I have an intent to construct a museum or construct a commercial mall. I have an intent to construct a commercial mall. So I initiate this project. I approach a project management consultant or a design firm. I tell them that this is my design intent. Provide me a detailed specification and details of this plan, the detailed master plan. Okay, then comes the project planning. Once the design is in place, the project planning comes into action. The project, what does project planning mean? We'll get into detail of that, but here just I'm giving an overview of this. In the project planning, we will understand what is the total scope of the project. We will bifurcate it, we will budget it, we will estimate it, we will prepare a bill of quantities, and we will estimate the total project, like how much it is going to cost exactly. Okay, then what we'll do, we will float for tenders, we will appoint a contractor, and we'll get him on board. Now this is where project execution starts. Once the contractor is on board, he has to start the project, because he is having all the design and drawings in place. So once the project execution starts, it will go for the particular duration of the project, say 12 months or 24 months, 1 year or 2 year project, depending upon the scale of the project. Then comes the project monitoring and controlling. This project monitoring and controlling starts right from the start of project execution, because you cannot monitor a project after the project is executed. You have to monitor right from the day one of the project when when it gets executed. So project monitoring and controlling goes in parallel with project execution. Finally, it comes up to the project closeout. What is project closeout? Once you have done the project execution and you are going to hand over it to the client or to the PMC, the project closeout is a set of documentations required to complete the process. It involves O&M manuals, that is operating manuals we say. Those are for MEP systems, MEP in the sense the mechanical, electrical and plumbing systems, and a DLP period will be there. DLP means defect liability period. For most of the larger scale projects, there will be 1 year of defect liability period. Right? Defect liability period in the sense, after the handover of the building or the project, for 1 year, any maintenance comes to the project, the contractor will be responsible. So the client, what they will do is they will hold 10% of the total project value and they will give it to the contractor only after the successful completion of defect liability period. This is just a check to ensure that the contractor has done the project with utmost sincerity and good quality as per requirements. Going into this knowledge areas, as I said, these five process groups has 49 processes under them, distributed between 10 knowledge areas. So what are these knowledge areas? The 10 knowledge areas in project management, this is also as per PMBOK guide, that is project management body of knowledge: project integration management, project scope management, schedule management, cost management, quality management, resource management, communications management, risk management, procurement management, stakeholder management. What is this project integration? These are very detailed topics. If we get opportunity to take another class or something, we'll get into this detail. But here I will just give an overview because we don't have that much of time. Project integration management is nothing but this is the first stage of the project. Here we will develop a project charter. Okay, what does a project charter mean? It is a high level document comprising of the requirements of the project. It registers that the project exists. Okay, so this is the first document prepared by the project manager. There is a project integration management, and once a project charter is done, we have to develop a project management plan. Project management plan is the next stage that involves. It's a combined document. It's a compiled document. We can say it's a consolidated document of all the bits and pieces we have, like all the IFC drawings, design drawings, tender drawings, specifications, BOQ, estimated cost, budgeted cost, everything. We combine it and we prepare a project management plan. Project management plan will also have a strategy how the contractor is going to approach for the completion of the project. What is his strategy? It's a document, important document. Then comes the scope management. Scope management is nothing but defining the project scope, identifying the project scope, and controlling any scope creeps. Scope creeps in the sense, if there is any scope changes in between, how to identify that and how to control it, how to record it. Okay. Schedule management. Schedule management is nothing but arriving at a time frame of the project. For example, any project, as I said, has two main parameters: cost and time. Okay. So schedule management is the one which determines the time. We have to fix a timeline for the project so that the cost doesn't overrun the budget. Cost management. As you said, cost management is nothing but estimating the cost, BOQs, everything. BOQ in the sense, bill of quantities, priced BOQs, and how much is the budget for the project, and how much will be the maximum allowed budget for the project, including any contingencies. What is quality management? Quality management is nothing but a ISO certified document which ensures that the project is going to be according to ISO standards. Okay. Resource management. What are the resources you're going to deploy? How many resources you're going to deploy? How you are going to deploy? Okay. Resource management. Resource means you have manpower, you have material, and you have money. Okay. These are the three main resources. Communications management. For any project to have an effective communication, there should be a communication protocol, right? So, for example, if you have to communicate with the most focal point of any project for communication is a document controller. The document controller sends all the letters, correspondence, everything. He establishes a communication protocol. But in case there are high-level communications, board-level communications, that will be through the project manager. So establishing that is communication management. Risk management. Every project will have a risk register, which is very important. This is to anticipate, forecast any risk which is going to impact a project, and to mitigate it in advance. Okay? Procurement management. Procurement involves the procurement of materials mostly. It involves suppliers, which we have to manage suppliers, from where we will be getting, to which route we will be getting it through, whether we are going to get the material from inside the country or outside the country, how to sea freight or air freight or through road, by which way we are going to get. This is to control all this is called procurement management, because unless you get the material on site, you cannot execute the project with only the labor, right? You need to have the materials on time to get the job done. Stakeholder management. Stakeholder management is, there are several parties in a project. For example, we have contractor, we have suppliers, we have subcontractors, we have material suppliers. So to manage all of them is called stakeholder management. This, maybe you will get to understand this more once you start your preparation for PMP, project management professional exams. Let me not go into detail. So the 5 process groups which you said: initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, controlling, closing, these are interrelated. So you might ask, what is a process? Nothing but a process is a set of interrelated actions and activities performed, to achieve a goal. That's it. So all these are interrelated. I mean interrelated in the sense they overlap each other. Like they don't wait for one stage to get completed to start the next stage. That will prolong the total duration of the project. So it will overlap. Okay. These are the project management process group and knowledge areas mapping. This is again from PMBOK. This has 49 processes, as I mentioned. So if you see under each knowledge area, there are certain process groups which involves initiation stage, planning, execution, monitoring, controlling, and closing. Right. So this, maybe you will not. I'll give this document. I'll circulate this document to you. Maybe you will not have time to go through all this, but this is an in-depth analysis of the process groups. Okay, each process group has a certain set of generally accepted practices and rules, and what it contains. This you will study in your. This will be available in the PMBOK guide, Project Management Body of Knowledge Guide, right? And this is something very important: change management. Like whenever a project is started, okay, it is obvious that there will be changes either in the design stage or the construction stage. But if it is not recorded properly, okay, or if there is no standard procedure to record them, okay, it is unlikely that you will lose money and time on that. Okay, either the client will not agree paying you, or you will end up not doing the job. So it is very important to record what are the changes advised by client, which has a direct impact on cost and time of an ongoing project. Okay? The stages are initiation stage, design stage changes, and what you have to plan. First, initiation, like you have to identify what are the changes. Then you have to design. You have to do a risk assessment, impact analysis. What are the changes? You have to just study that. Study the changes. Then you have to plan, like how you are going to transition the changes into implementation. Okay. Then you have to get the approval from the client for the requested change. Okay, because this will have a cost impact, this will have time impact. You have to intimate the client accordingly so that he gets to know that the project is going to delay. Okay. Now, what are the do's? You have to start implementing them. Then you have to keep a check on them, and you have to finally close out. So close out in the sense you have to keep a lessons learned record always. For any project, it's a good practice to keep a lessons learned, because there may be you might encounter a lot of difficulties in change management. For example, the client advises some changes, and he will force the contractor to do it without any cost implications. So these are all lessons learned. So you have to develop a strategy to how to approach the client and how to explain him that this is going to have a cost and time impact, which is not feasible for me, right? Let us go to the next slide. Now let us come to the most important part, which I'm here for, actually, planning. What is planning? Planning, it's an essential management tool, obviously. What do you do in a planning? It's like in a project, a planning means it should clearly define what to do, how to do, and when to do. Okay, sounds simple, right? What to do, what you'll do is you will define the project scope. You will identify the project scope, you will define the project scope, you will estimate the project, you will budget the project, and you will bring the project to entirety. Okay, this is what the total project is. Defining that is what to do, how to do it. In how to do it, what you do is you will define a plan, a methodology, or an approach, like how you are going to do it, with how many resources you are going to do it, and with what are all the resources you are going to do it. How many machineries will be there, how many manpower will be there, and what are the kinds of materials will be there, and when you are going to get the materials, everything, it should be in how to do. When to do it is to develop a schedule, establish a time frame. Like, unless you have a master program which says that the project should be completed in 1 hour time, in 1 year time, or 2 years time, 2 years duration, you cannot determine the cost for the project, right? So cost is directly dependent with time. Importance of planning in construction industry. Planning is applicable to all industries, and now let us talk about construction industry. Planning a project before execution is very essential in construction for the following reasons. Okay? Because you know the complete scope of the project, the timeline of the project, the cost of the project. You plan the required resources in advance to complete the project. You estimate the total cost of the project with contingencies to avoid any loss or delay penalty enforced by the client. Now, what is contingency? Let me brief you. Contingency is nothing but a provision left for any unfortunate or unforeseen events. For example, take this COVID-19 example. Ongoing projects might not have anticipated this COVID-19 impact, but they would have allowed a contingency period of 15 days to 30 days in their project. Okay? The contingency period, in the sense, for that 15 to 30 days, if there is no work happening at site, the project will still be completed on time, which is also known as a float. We have a float in every project. Okay, we should have a float in the project so that we are always on the safer side, because we don't know, like for example, like COVID-19, any adverse impact may happen. There may be a fire accident, there may be a earthquake, or there may be a natural disaster, there may be a cyclone which stops the work, or there may be a lot of these are all captured in the risk register as well. So that is where risk register is also very important. And another one, you anticipate any risk that may affect the project execution and mitigate it in advance. Okay, we might not have anticipated the risk of this COVID-19, but I am sure from hereafter, all the projects being budgeted, they will surely have a risk added for unforeseen circumstances like COVID-19. It may be COVID-20, COVID-21, or any other phenomena, but there will be a risk. And what is the mitigation measure? Like how COVID-19 impacted the construction industry. We had a tough time maintaining the total labors at site. Okay, because due to the government regulations, we have to practice social distancing. We have to cut the strength of the workers by 30%, which was very difficult, because in a site and with 1,000 laborers at a site, you cannot maintain the social distancing so effectively. Eventually, few countries had closed their construction projects, closed their sites. Everyone was staying indoors. There was a lot of impact on the construction industry. However, in future, we have to consider risk for that, and we have to allow a contingency period, and we have to allow a cost also for these kind of situations. Now, we have heard about planning. And what is scheduling? Is there a difference between planning and scheduling? Are both the same? No, both are not the same. Planning defines what is to be done and how it is to be done. Okay, while scheduling defines when it is to be done and who should do it. Okay, you get my point. Planning defines what and how. What is to be done. Identifying the project scope, you will come to know what is to be done. how it is to be done. Identify the resources, map the resources. Okay. While scheduling defines when it is to be done, what is the timeline for the project, and who should do it. Like how many resources will be there. For example, if you're in a construction stage, if you are in a substructure or a concrete and you're pouring the concrete for a slab, how many resources will be there? Okay, how many carpenters will be there for the shuttering? How many scaffolders will be there for erecting the scaffolds? And how many bar benders and steel fixers will be there to put the reinforcement? How many concrete masons will be there to pour the concrete? How many concrete vibrators will be there? How many concrete mixers, that is machinery, how many concrete mixers will be there? How many concrete pumps will be there? These are all some few of the resources which are required to execute that particular activity. In scheduling, you will define all this. What are some planning and scheduling techniques? You might have already studied this, but it's a most popular method to determine the critical path and the longest path. Program evaluation review technique, which is called as PERT. We have network diagrams, we have Gantt charts, we have calendars, timelines, WBS charts, a fishbone diagram. Fishbone diagram is nothing but it is a cause and effect diagram. You know, each and every topic has its own details, which I don't have the liberty to discuss them now. I don't have the time. Now, what are the softwares, various softwares used in planning and scheduling? Various softwares used in planning and scheduling for construction projects. The most popular ones which in Gulf. For example, I have worked in Oman for around 5 years, and then now I'm in Qatar. So what I have observed, what I have seen, what I have worked on is we use Primavera for developing the master programs for all major projects. Okay. We use Microsoft Project, especially for projects related to projects in Qatar. Few of the projects in Qatar, like we have the client. If the client is Microsoft, we have few data centers. We have to use Microsoft Project because he will not allow to use for us to use Oracle software. Okay. Then SAP. Particularly in SAP, there are several modules. We have a PS module, which is for planning, that is project scheduling module. We have PM module, we have that is controlling the machineries. We have MM module, that is material management. That comes for the procurement part. Material management is for procurement part. PM is plant and machinery part. That is for the asset department, plant and machinery department. PS module is for planning department, project scheduling. Okay. Then there is a software named Candy. This is for estimation. If you are interested into quantitative analysis and quantity surveying, you might very well do this Candy software, which is very helpful for estimation. Apart from these technical softwares, there are a lot of softwares. There are a lot of tools. Recently, there have been a lot of tools. Okay, MS Excel and PowerPoint is obviously it is a basic thing for every one of us, regardless of planning and scheduling. MS Excel and PowerPoint will be required for any job and for any position. Be it even if you are a site engineer, you will be requiring this. Even if you are a project manager, you will be requiring this. So even if you become a director level position, you will still be using this MS Excel. So MS Excel, don't underestimate MS Excel. It's a very important tool. This will be useful for all presentations and planning related reports. Let us see how Primavera looks. What are its functions, basics of. You might have learned this Primavera software in your college, or you might have learned it as a separate course. If you have not done it, I suggest in your final year you take some time off and learn the softwares Primavera, MS Project, and some technical softwares like AutoCAD is also a must. AutoCAD, you should definitely know that, as well as StatPro if you are going to a more technical line. For example, if you're taking structural engineering as your master's, or you're going into designing, you should learn StatPro, ANSYS, like these softwares, right? So let us see how a Primavera program looks. This is a sample. This is one of my previous projects. Okay. What we have in Primavera is we have an activity ID. Activity ID is always unique. That is the first column, right? So the project name is on the top. This is a city center. This is the commercial mall built in Oman. The client was Majid Al Futtaim and the consultants were Lasico. They are a Lebanese company. Majid Al Futtaim is a Dubai company, right? So what we have here is we have activity ID the first. It is a unique activity ID. Okay. Every activity ID will be unique. it will not be repetitive. Then we have activity names. What is the activity? Then we have the BL project duration. What is BL? BL is nothing but baseline. Baseline means first when you establish a project's timeline, you fix it as a baseline. Okay, baseline means that is the base, that is a base which you will refer to over the complete duration of the project, right? So if you fix the baseline as 12 months, the baseline remains same. After 12 months, if your project is getting extended, you have to apply for an extension of time called EOT with a complete delay analysis, like whose delay it was. Either it was a contractor delay or client delay. Okay, if it's a contractor delay, obviously you will not be awarded an EOT. You will be getting charged for delaying the project. If it's a client related delay, you will be getting an extension if it is proven properly, right? Mostly contractors will not submit their own delay. Concurrent delay can be submitted. Concurrent delay in the sense, because of the client's delay, the contractor delay. These are called concurrent delays. Delay from both the parties, right? So we have this baseline project duration. Baseline project duration is the total activity. Each activity has a particular duration. Baseline project start. So when the project should be started, when the project should be completed, or in this case, when a particular activity should be started, when a particular activity should be completed, right? Here you can see that there is only a start date or a finish date in most of the activities. Those are called milestones. A milestone will always have either a start date or a finish date. So it can be a start milestone. That is, for example, start of the project cannot have an end date. So it will have only a start date. So it is a start milestone. Completion of the project cannot have a start date. Completion of the project will have a finish milestone only. Okay, handover and completion of the project. So these are the milestones, and you may have interim milestones in a project, several interim milestones. Now coming to the right side, there is a chart with bars, colored bars and dots. What is it? That is called a Gantt chart. Okay, in a Gantt chart, you have this red color line, red color line, yellow color line. You can see the legends here in the bottom left corner. The yellow is the total project baseline bar, like how long the project duration is. Okay, the red color is a critical remaining work. Okay, the dotted diamond ones are called the milestones, and summary level is defined as with a small arrow down. Okay, this is just a sample. Once you learn the primer of project, you will get to know that this is very easy. This looks difficult, but this is very easy. All right, but to develop this plan, you have to first understand that what is the procedure of the construction, what is the procedure of authority approvals, what is the procedure for expanding the engineering activities, expanding the shop drawings, everything, right? But basically, you should know how to construct a project from start to completion, at least the major activities, so that you can arrive at a timeline, right? So once you have done with the program, the Primavera, you will be asked to provide a S-curve. S-curve is nothing but a progress curve, which you get it from the Primavera. Here is a sample of one. Each month you have a planned percentage of work. This will be measured against the actuals. Okay. For example, in first month I have 1.74% of planned work, and okay, so in the second month 1.4, 1.1. So it's gradually the cumulative is coming to 100%. So each month you will have an actuals of this. If the cumulative actual and the cumulative planned is more or less equal, your project is on schedule and on time. If the cumulative actual is less than planned, your project is behind schedule. If the cumulative planned actual is more than planned, your project is ahead of schedule, right? So this is MS project program sample. This is we saw a sample of Primavera. This is how a project in MS project should be scheduled. Here we have a task mode, that is automatically scheduled, manually scheduled, or automatically scheduled. We have a task name, we have durations, we have start, we have finish, and we have the predecessors, like which activity should be started against which activity. Okay? And on the right side, you have a Gantt chart, and you have legends, like how it is related, everything, right? And okay, I don't have Primavera, I don't have MS Project. Now still I need a program. You can do one in Excel also. So this is a sample for design and build contract. This is called a block phase program. Like you, here I have mentioned high level activities and what is the duration of each activity and in which month it should be performed. Like I have highlighted it. So you can do it according to your project requirements. You can expand the activities and you can prepare one. I'll share the slide with you. All right, we have, I think we have covered most of the basic questions, many basics of planning and project management construction industry. So now if you are planning for a career into project management, what is to be done? I would strongly suggest that site knowledge is must. Not to be good, to be a good planner or manager, you should have practical knowledge of how work is done. No? After engineering, try to get your master's degree either in construction project management or any other specializations like structural engineering, highway engineering for a more technical role, right? And project management is not just related to planning engineers. Anyone can become a project manager provided he has project management knowledge and he knows how to manage the people, he knows how to manage the resources, and he knows some leadership qualities. He has some leadership skills to drive the team to execute the project, right? And get certifications if you have not done already. Get certification of scheduling softwares like Primavera, MSP, Candy, SAP PS. I would not prefer that because it's costly software. But Primavera and MS Project, you should definitely do it along with AutoCAD. Okay. Start your career as a junior planner or site engineer. Get into planning and project controls field. Okay. And parallelly, get your CAPM certification done. That is Certified Associate Project Management, which is a part of PMP. Once you get 3 to 5 years of field experience, aim for a PMP certification. A PMP certification will enable you to become a project manager for any multinational company also. Okay, this is a prerequisite for them. Thank you for your attention, guys. Any questions? Please highlight them in the chat.
So thank you, Sudhakar sir, for joining us. So I think we're having a question. What are the biggest challenges that we are faced while working on a project?
The primary challenge in any project is delay due to the contractors because of suppliers or because of our dependencies. I think the voice is getting duplicated. Can you mute me, Soumya? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
All right. So the challenges in any construction industry is how to complete the project on time. That is a main challenge because 80 to 90% of the projects don't get completed on time. If a project's total duration is 6 months, people end up completing it in 7 or 8 months, or in worst cases, 10 months, right? So there is a delay of at least up to 20 to 30% of the total project duration time. To complete this on time is a big challenge, and few factors contribute to this delay. One is the inability of the contractor to manage his resources. Like if, for example, to complete a slab casting or to complete a wall's block work and the plaster, he requires 10 masons, okay, but the contractor deploys only 5 masons because he wants to pay only for 5 people. Those 5 people cannot get the job done of 10 people in one day. If, for example, 10 people can complete 100 square meter of plaster in one day, the 5 people will take 2 days to complete it, right? Obviously. So when you deploy less resources, obviously the activity gets delayed, and when the activity gets delayed, the project gets delayed, right? And one more thing, resources, when you talk about resources, it is not just about labors, it is about machineries also. Like when you start with the project for excavation, okay, if you manually excavate with the help of shovels and labors, right, you will take 5 to 6 days for excavating the footings, right? Whereas if you do with the machine, okay, if you do with the JCB 4CX, you will do it in 1 day for a small scale project I'm talking about. So this is giving you a saving of 5 days, right? So imagine in a big construction project, like large scale project, how many days you can save it with proper machinery. So when people don't use the appropriate resources, they end up losing valuable time. They might save the cost, but it is going to cost them at the end of the project. They might save the cost initially. They might think that, okay, I'm paying only half of the labor cost. I am not paying for the heavy machinery. I'm using manual labor. Instead of the machinery cost, I'm paying for more for labors that they will not understand. But once the deadline comes, the client will impose a penalty on them because you have delayed the project. I don't know how you have, it is up to you how you should manage the project. I cannot tell you that you have to use this machinery, you have to use this many manpower. It is up to you. I have given you a timeline and my penalty clause is clear. You delay the project, you pay the penalty, right? So that is how people end up losing profit margins from the projects. Deploy proper resources. First, plan how many resources you are going to deploy. Put a productivity rate against each resources. Like a mason can complete 10 square meter of plaster per day. Arrive with the total quantity of the plaster. How many masons are required to complete that particular job? Put those many masons into that particular activity, and you will end up completing the activity in that particular same day you have planned. You will not slip your target. Okay, this is how a project has to be managed, and of course, the resource management of resources is the key challenge in any construction project.
So we have next question, sir. How scheduling can affect the project planning?
As I said, for any project, the client will have his own timeline. Like say, the client says that I want a project to be completed in 1 year, right? So you have to develop a schedule for that 1 year only, right? First, you have to work out. You have to work out whether in 1 year the scheduling the project is feasible, is possible or not. How will you work out that? You should have standard productivity rates of each activity. How much a mason how many blocks a mason can construct, how many area of plaster a mason can do, how many square meters of paint a painter can do per day, how much m cube of concrete a mason can trowel finish it. So you should have all these productivity rates with you. You should have the quantities of the total project. Okay, this will be there in the bill of quantities. Bill of quantities is a document which has all the quantities of the project or building. So you will divide this quantity with the productivity rate. You will arrive at the total number of people required for that particular activity, right? Based on that particular, if you have 10 masons required for an activity and you want to complete this activity in 3 days, you divide the 10 people by 3 days. So daily you will be required to deploy 3 to 4 of number of masons in that particular activity. This is how you schedule a project. And when you do this with a proper breakup, and you arrive at a completion date, you will get to know that, okay, this project can be done in 10 months also if we deploy more resources, right? Or this project, no, it is not possible. We have to get it completed in 14 months only. So then in that case, you have an option either to approach the client to extend the timeline by 2 months, which in most cases, he will not agree. He will simply ask you to increase the resources. Instead of putting 10 masons, put 15 masons, get the job done. Instead of doing it in 3 days, the activity, do it in 2 days, put more people, squeeze the schedule. Then again, you will go back to your program, you will work out, you will ensure that in 12 months, with this many resources, you can definitely get the job done. This is how you schedule a project. The timeline is fixed by the client, the start date is fixed, the completion date is fixed. In between, how you manage is what a task of a planning engineer and a project manager. Okay, they have to effectively allocate the resources and they have to deploy those resources.
So another question, sir. What are the precautions to be taken during planning, designing, and management of the projects?
It's a interesting question, but it's not a one-line answer. There are a lot of things to be considered. For example, in any project, before tendering for a project, before tendering for a project, you will first have to analyze the risks involved in the project, in executing the project, the risk involved, any internal risk and external risk as well. Like if it is a government project, there are risks, there are a lot of risks. Like you will not get payments on time. Okay, there might be political pressure. I don't know. There might be a lot of corruption in that. So you may have to bribe most of the money to those people to get the job done. These are the risks in a government project. In a private project, you have certain risks like there will be too much of pressure to complete the job on time. Like private projects, almost all projects, unlike government projects which don't care about time, private projects are very stringent on time. They will ask you that I need by this time, I need this project, means they will demand it. If you're not getting it completed, they will impose penalty on you, and they will make sure that you complete the project on time, because they will appoint a PMC from their side who will be monitoring you day by day. You will have to submit your daily reports. You will have to submit your weekly reports. You will have to submit your bi-weekly report. That is every 14 days once. You will have to submit your monthly report. So in all these reports, every day and every week, you will give them a planned percentage, an actual percentage of the project. If the variance is more than 1%, that is, if the scheduled performance index, you will say SPI. Now, if the scheduled performance index, you can Google it, SPI, scheduled performance index. So if it is more than 1, the project is ahead of schedule. If it is less than 1, the project is behind schedule. If the project, if the SPI is lesser than 0.9, the client and the PMC is going to write you contractual letters asking you for a mitigation program, that how you are going to complete it on time. So before scheduling any project, you have to develop a risk register. You have to anticipate all the risk, consider all possibilities, and provide a contingency period of at least 1 month. Okay, you have to consider this in schedule. Very important. Now, if the project timeline is for 12 months, you have to plan such that you will complete it in 11 months. Okay, so that remaining 1 month will be your contingency period. In that 1 month, if in case the project gets delayed, you will, it doesn't matter, because you have 1 month of float in your project, 1 month of contingency period. You will complete it before the 12 months of period of given by the client. So you should have an internal target program of completing it ahead of schedule, right? So and there are certain tools before scheduling, for scheduling. As I said, I use Primavera and MSP, and allocating the resources also, because if your company doesn't have the resources, that is the required resources to complete the job, you cannot complete it before schedule. Okay, you cannot squeeze the program. So it depends on you how you plan it. For example, if you can plan an activity with 1 mason, as well as you can plan the activity with 10 masons also. But allocating your company resources accordingly, because your company may be having multiple projects operated in one particular time. If it is just single project, you might focus all the resources on that particular project. But if you're having 10 different projects and you have a critical project, you might consider taking the resources from other projects and focusing on this project to get the project done on priority. So it's about allocating resources also. You have to discuss with your project manager how it can be done effectively, and the project manager will advise you that okay, we can consider sparing few more masons, few more workers for this job.
So another question by Karishma. As we have advanced softwares like StatPro, ETABS, Revit, etc., does it necessary to learn AutoCAD?
AutoCAD is very much necessary, because not every company is going to give you a licensed version of Revit and StatPro and ETABS. Okay, most of the companies here in Gulf especially, they follow AutoCAD. AutoCAD license is much cheaper compared to others, and they have company licenses. So they do not encourage using pirated versions. So AutoCAD is the most commonly used software to determine the quantities. You also have a software named Navisworks. In Navisworks, it's you plan the building like a 3D model of a building in Navisworks, and it gives you all the quantities, including the volume, including the wall area, everything it gives you. So there are a lot of advanced softwares now, but AutoCAD is one of the basic ones, right? It is very essential for all of us. Even if you have to generate a plan layout of the building, okay, you can do it with AutoCAD. And AutoCAD, I believe it's easily available. It's easily accessible to most of us, and we have learned AutoCAD in our college also. So I think AutoCAD will be more helpful. Of course, StatPro and ETABS and other softwares will be useful, provided you do your masters in structural engineering and you want to get into rebar detailing and these stuffs. StatPro, ETABS, ANSYS, these all will be useful.
So another question: is there any machine learning softwares for project management?
Machine learning softwares, AI softwares are getting developed. I have not learned it yet, but I have read that there are a lot of softwares getting developed and they compute everything for you. But it is still a developing technology, and those are not established and proven methods, especially not here in Gulf as of yet. But in future, of course, yes, there will be artificial intelligence softwares and machine learning softwares which will be helpful to determining the quantities instead of going the traditional way of measuring the AutoCAD drawings and calculating the resources. As I said, Navisworks is also a kind of a machine learning software. You input a plan in the software and it gives you a 3D image of the project and the total area of the project, including each walls area, ceiling area, floor area, deducting all the window openings, everything, to calculate the quantities. Yes, it is there.
So next question: in the construction design of elastometric bearings, why are steel plates inserted inside the bearings?
Sorry, come again.
In the construction design of elastometric bearings, why are steel plates inserted inside the bearings?
Steel plates inserted. Actually, elastometric bearing is a kind of earthquake resisting structures. Elastometric bearings, that is what I have learned here. I have learned in my academics. We in order to provide a quake resistant structures, we have a lot of methods to do it. Elastometric bearing is one of them. Steel plate is inserted because steel has very good flexural strength and tensile strength, right? So it can bend, it can withstand, it can flex like anything, it can expand and it can contract, and still it will not break like concrete. That is why tensile plates are provided in any quake resistant structure. That is a purpose of providing tensile rods in the reinforcement also, because previously we didn't have this old aged homes and all. If you see in like previous generations and all, they didn't have any rods or anything to hold the building. It would be just a column of with stones, and so now we have rods which bend and which stand. So even if there is a quake or something, the structure will not collapse. Most of the structures, quake resistant structures, will not collapse because steel doesn't break. It tends to bend and it is flexible, but it doesn't break so easily.
Okay, sir.
Hope that clarifies.
So any other doubts? Okay, can you tell us what are the do's and don'ts while searching a job abroad?
Yes, I think one more question I saw: can force majeure clause can be implied even though it is not explicitly given in the conditions of contract? In the conditions of contract, always a force majeure clause is included. There is no conditions of contract which I have seen without a force majeure clause. There is a force majeure clause, but what can be considered as a force majeure? For example, you can argue that this COVID-19 pandemic is, the question is by Vishwanath, so I'm just reading it. The answer is to you, Vishwanath, and to others listening to this. The question is, what can you consider as a force majeure? For example, this COVID-19 pandemic, can it be considered as a force majeure? According to FIDIC conditions of contract, no, it is arguable, like it is not clear. Okay. So it is debatable. The contractor can say that, no, it is a force majeure. We didn't anticipate it. No one did. But again, that is not an act of God. And that is not something uncontrollable. Still people are allowed to work, but provided they can work with the proper social distancing norms and the proper government guidelines, following the proper government guidelines. However, if the entire country is shut, or if the entire constructions are closed for a prolonged period of time, forcibly by the government, it can be considered as a force majeure. It is still debatable. We cannot take this to an arbitrary decision, but considering the inordinate delays due to COVID-19, an extension of time will definitely be provided by the consultant, by the project management consultancy, and by the employer. All over the world, projects are getting delayed at least by 2 months, in spite of allowing them to work. So the extension of times for this will be provided, but not under force majeure. It will be awarded under a delay claim. The contractor will submit a delay claim stating that this is a disruption to my work because of so and so reasons, obviously due to COVID-19 and so measures introduced by the government. So these disruptions of work will be recorded as a delay claim, and this will be submitted to the client, and the client or the PMC will analyze this, and they will advise on how many days extension can be provided. Now, an important thing to be noted here: if before the COVID-19 pandemic, your projects planned versus actual percentage, that is progress, if planned percentage is at 50% and your actual percentage is 40%, and no, you cannot claim for the delay right away because already you are on a delay. Now you cannot simply say that your project is delayed because of COVID-19. Okay, so post COVID-19, again you will submit a progress report. In that, the planned percentage will be 70 and the actual percentage will be 40. So the delay of incremental delay of this 20%, for this you are eligible to claim the delay, but not for the entire 30%. The client will argue, you were already on delay, don't put the entire delay on this COVID-19, you were already on delay. So if you are claiming for 3 months of extension, I'm not going to give you 3 months of extension. I'm going to give you only 1 month of extension, and you have to complete the project within that. So the client will advise like that accordingly.
So next question.
Yes, next question.
I think this will be the last question. What risks should we plan to manage during planning of a project?
To plan, we should not plan for risk. Actually, we should anticipate the risk. There is a risk register in every project which is developed from at the starting stage of the project. Okay, this risk register will anticipate lot of risk, right from construction risk, health and safety risk, material and shipping risks, cost and budget, financial cash flow risk, and any unforeseen circumstances or like COVID-19 or any pandemics risks, any risk related to the government restrictions on the project, okay, flow of funds from either from the client or from any third party, and any force majeure clauses, any labor strikes or anticipated labor strikes, worker strikes, or skills of the labor. Like we cannot keep a person as a mason, whereas he doesn't know the mason job. It happened in my previous company. He's hired as a mason, but he doesn't know the mason job. So we call on paper he's a skilled worker, but at site he's just a worker. He can act as a helper, not as a skilled mason. So this is a risk. Like this, there are a lot more risks. At least there will be 20 to 25 risks which you can anticipate in a project. And there are some site-specific risks. Like if the project site is in a low-lying area, there is a risk of water getting into your project during the excavation stage or during the substructure stage. In case of a heavy rain or something, once the water gets into your footings, it is very difficult. You have to introduce dewatering pumps, pull out all the water, then you have to again start from the scratch. That severely hampers your project. That is a risk you have to consider. And if your project is on a hilly station or something, there are chances of a tropical storm, and there is chances of heavy winds affecting cyclones affecting the project. There are a lot of circumstances. There are some site specific risks also which should be considered, including the temporary movement of the traffic. There should be sufficient movement for your heavy vehicles to get the materials into your project site. Like it cannot block the road and it cannot disturb something. And for example, in Gulf, we have another risk of projects in a residential locality cannot generate dust. So, but in construction, it is eventual. Everywhere the dust will come. So what we have to do is we used to spray at least 10,000 gallons of water every day over the barren land there. Whenever the vehicle is coming, if it's a dry land, a lot of dust will be there. And if it's a wet land, dust will not be there. Much dust will not be there. So we used to spray waters. We used to spend money on that to avoid any fine or penalty from the government. So these are all the risks you should anticipate. Your project manager will better advise you on site-specific risk. General risk you will be able to determine, but site-specific and some technical risk also, your project manager will be advising you.
So one more question. Day by day material cost varies. So if it impacts on the cost of the project, what should we do?
Yes, actually, very interesting question, Shekhar. What we have to do is all the major companies have a frame agreement. What is a frame agreement? A frame agreement in the sense they will have a frame agreement with the building material supply company saying that, okay, I'm going to purchase the material only from you, provided you fix the same cost for the next 1 year. Okay, for 1 year, you should not increase the cost and you should not decrease the cost also. He will say that I will not decrease the cost also. For example, if the market value of steel increases, he will not increase the price given to you. He will still give you the same price which it is there in the frame agreement. That is the start of the year. Okay. If the steel price decreases, okay, then you cannot ask him that, okay, the steel price in the market has reduced. You give me the reduced price. No, he will not do that. He will still give you at the same price. But that is an unlikely case, because in most of the cases, the value of the material only increases. It doesn't decrease much. So it's better to have a frame agreement with any construction building material supply company, so that you need not have to worry about the escalation of material cost over the period of time. Okay, whatever you estimated, you're going to get for the same price. But if a project, if it's a large scale project and if it is going to go more than 2 years or so, then you should consider having a frame agreement for more than 1 year, that is 2 years or 3 years. In most of the cases, the supplier will not agree for 3 years or 2 years of frame agreement. Okay, in that cases, you have to make provisions in your contract price stating that for the first year, I will be charging this much for the material. For the second year, there will be a 5% increase in the total material cost. So you have to include that in your tender cost while estimating the project. I hope that clarifies, Shekhar. Any other questions?
So what are the qualities of becoming a project manager?
There are a lot of qualities of becoming a project manager. You will learn that with experience, as well as when you prepare for your CAPM, Certified Associate Project Management, or PMP, that is Project Management Professional. Some of the basic questions, some of the basic qualities, like you should have some leadership skills. Obviously, you should know how to drive your team with passion. You should know the job first. Okay, unless you know the job, how it is done, you cannot guide others on how it should be done. Okay, project manager, a project is a baby of the project manager. Okay, so he should be solely responsible for the project, of course, with the help of the team members, but he is the responsible person, answerable person. So he is required to have a complete, thorough book knowledge and field knowledge of civil engineering, how a project is done from start to, from scratch to handover. Once it is there, he can drive the project to completion. You will have a detailed brief on the roles and responsibilities of project manager in the PMBOK guide. If you can have a look on that, that will be helpful. Another one I could say is without doing master's degree is 5 years experience in site is enough for a person to become a project manager. Is it possible? Uh, Actually, see, Mr. Raja, actually, you have to set your goal like that. Within 6 years of your career, you should become a project manager. I mean, after 6 years, right after 6 years of your career, you should be able to become a project manager. But that depends. Like not all companies will have a project manager position vacant for a person with 6 years experience. Like in a small scale company, you would become a project manager, especially in India. Like, but in an MNC or in a big companies, they prefer people with at least 10 years or 10 to 12 years of experience for the for being a project manager. And without doing masters, yes, you can become a project manager without doing master's degree, provided you have an extensive site experience and demonstrated experience of getting the projects completed on time and within budget. That is all that matters. If you have a history of completing a project on time and within budget, you are the best project manager, I would say. Like a very few people are able to do that, especially in large scale projects on time and within budget. Yes, you can you are a project manager yourself once you do that. So it comes with experience. If we have another one, if we have already constructed the foundation, but now we find that the bar diameter is needed to be changed, what can be the best alternative solution? Okay, so foundation has been constructed and now you have to change the bar dia. It can be done by anchoring. Anchoring is a method which is very prominently used all around the world. You have to drill the footings, foundations, at least for up to 30D of rod. Okay, 30D of rod. At least you have to have a certain lap length. Okay, you have to drill it, you have to anchor it, and you have to use very strong chemicals for that anchoring the rod. Okay, anchoring the rod, you can use here. We use chemicals like from the company named Hilti. Okay, Hilti is a company which provides anchoring chemicals, which are very strong and very efficient. Foundation level anchoring few rods is acceptable, but if you have to anchor, if you have to change the dia of the foundations for the entire building, it is not advisable. Okay, it is a waste of time. It is a waste of cost. It's better that you demolish the foundations, you remove the foundations. If those are small footings and isolated footings, you remove those and you construct new footings. Or if those are isolated footings, there will be gap between each footings. You redesign your plan and place the footings in between the existing footings, such that you should you don't have to demolish or remove the existing footings and such that. So anchoring is a good option, but not advisable if it has to be done for all the footings.
So
is there any way to strengthen the foundation which is yes, Soumya, please go ahead.
yeah, is there any way to strengthen the foundation which is constructed long way?
Yes, there are certain ways to strengthen the foundation, but for that you need to expose the foundation first. If you're talking about just strengthening the foundation, if the building is already constructed, okay, it is not a very good option to strengthen the foundation. Okay, still, if the building is a heritage building, there are ways to do it. There are ways to strengthen the structure. Okay, not just the foundation, you will have to strengthen the columns as well. Okay, how you do it is you have to expose the foundation first, and once you expose the foundation, the footing will be visible to you. Okay, now check. You have to do a non-destructive testing on that. Non-destructive testing is NDT, we call it. It's a method to check the strength of the footing. Okay, and how strong the footing is. Okay, you will get to know the strength of the footing, and based on that, you will have to design how many rods you are going to add it on the footings. Okay, above the footings I'm talking about. Okay, if there is a footing, there is a footing of size 1 meter by 1 meter, which is already casted, and there will be a stop column above that. You have to add additional rods above the footing. You have to expose the footing. You have to add additional rods above the footing small rods, 8 mm or 6 mm rods, depending on the design. You have to tie the stirrups and you have to place the shutters and you have to do micro concreting on that. Okay, so micro concreting, it will act like a protective layer of the existing footing, so that it will prevent any spalling or any bulging of the existing footings. So yes, it is possible, but again, it is not advisable. It is possible.
So I think that's it for today, sir. Thank you for joining us, and thank you participants for joining us today. So a feedback link will be sent to your mails. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I take this opportunity to thank each and every one of the students. Hope you're all staying safe and staying home.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day. Link will be shared for the presentation shortly by your staff.
Okay, sir. So dear participants, we'll share the link for feedback within some couple of hours, just to fill the feedback form for getting his certificates.